aware of it. The Honourable Lady who spoke yesterday in the mesh implants debate in Westminster Hall, which I spoke on as well. I was contacted by a large number of those, but you know something? They didn't know that either. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. But yet no, they had the repercussions of years and years. There was one honourable member referred yesterday to a lady who had to go in 3 times over 2 years, over 6 years it was, to get operations before they eventually got it cured. And Primitus as well. I mean, I was talking to one of the members who's not here, and he was referring it, telling me that he had been involved in this one. So there are lots and lots of issues and lots of scandals, and I think we need to do what other members have said and bring this all together, perhaps under one headline. To me, although I'm not a doctor, I don't have any doctor skills. I probably can read things when it comes to symptoms. I don't have any medical training. It would appear that this rate is significant enough that people should be fully informed of the significant risks before they're prescribed the medication. So it is embedded in their mind that there are massive risks with pregnancy and these drugs. I'm sure that many of us were supplied the briefing from the Epilepsy Action, and their statistics are hard to read, but they're very clear. But I would want to refer, if I could, just to one of some of the background, and thank Hansard as well for their very in-depth information they give us to prepare for this debate. I want to quote one thing from that if I can, and they referred to the survey because all I remember they referred go back to 1995 and 96 where this was first mooted. There was a problem, and nothing really seemed to kick in to take action. And they refer to this survey as been repeated in 2017 when it was found that 18% of women taking the epilepsy medicine sodium valproate didn't know the risks this medicine can pose during pregnancy, and 28% of women said that they had not been informed of the risks of this medicine in pregnancy. How can that be that the lessons haven't been learned? Dr. Bryce Thomas, honorary consultant in epilepsy at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, said this is a dramatic and important survey focusing on a crucial area for women with epilepsy. And as a medical community, we clearly could be doing more and should be doing more. Even if women are being told of the risks, this may be at the wrong time for them or in the wrong way. So sometimes when you tell a story and you tell what the risks are, the way it's told isn't done in a way that they can even understand it, and that has to be wrong. So the conversation needs to be had, but it also needs to be repeated, and people need to be aware of that. And I'm not quite sure if that's been done in the way that it should. The Epilepsy Action and statistics are as follows. Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency figures suggest that up to 4 in 10 babies are at risk of development disorders of valproate medicine is taken during pregnancy. 4 in 10? Yeah. That's massive. Yeah. I mean, how can that be ignored? Yeah. Approximately 1 in 10 babies is at risk of physical birth defects. Babies affected by sodium valproate can have severe problems that require lifelong care and support. You know, are we looking at prevention? Are we looking at the future? Are we looking at what the long-term care will be? I suspect we're not. It's estimated that 20,000 babies have been affected by sodium valproate, and total 400 babies a year are born to women taking sodium valproate. Epilepsy Action, the Epilepsy Society and Young Epilepsy have conducted a survey of over 2,000 women with epilepsy and found that some women are still not aware of the risks of taking epilepsy medicine in pregnancy. More than a quarter, 20% of women taking an epilepsy drug have not been given information, as I said before. And again, conscious of your indication, and I'll come to the conclusion. Again, this would indicate to me that anyone who is on the medication should have taken time by a knowledgeable medical professional to go through the risks of being pregnant whilst on the drug. I know this, after you become pregnant, may well be too late. Therefore, the discussions with your GP are very important. It is not a matter of simply stopping the drug when you get a positive pregnancy test. This is not safe to do so. And I would urge, in conclusion, to follow the 8 points. But I say this, do the compensation fund that we all in this house want to see, because that will at least help those families deal with the financial positions that they're in. Mr Deputy Speaker, thank you.
I'm just going to bring Cat Smith in. If you could finish at 1:30, I'd be very grateful. And could we try and see if we can get about 9.5 minutes from the wind-up speech in order to bring in Cat Smith.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to be able to be squeezed into the end of this debate, and I'll be very brief in my comments. This debate really started for me within days actually of being elected as a Member of Parliament in 2015, when my constituent Janet Williams got in touch and asked whether or not she could meet with me. And when I was first elected as an MP, I imagined I'd be meeting most of my constituents back up in Lancashire. But Janet, I think, was very keen to get a meeting in very quickly and actually chased me down to Westminster, and I met with her in Portcullis House along with Emma Murphy, both of whom have been mentioned quite a lot in this debate, and I pay tribute to the work that they both do on this very important issue. And when I met Janet, to be honest, my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe that in this day and age we were still in a situation whereby women were being prescribed drugs which were harming their unborn babies, and they were not being told about it. But it wasn't just that they weren't being told about it, but frankly it was a cover-up. And I find this to be a national scandal, and I do not use those words lightly, because for Janet's sons, Philip and Lee, both of whom I've met and of course are my constituents too, this is a life sentence. And Janet should not feel guilty for taking the drugs that her doctors told her to take during her pregnancies, but for her sons, they will continue to need care throughout their entire lives. They are two young men in their 20s, and that's certainly a huge social care need. Now, this scandal started in the 1970s, but as I've said, Mr Deputy Speaker, it continues today. Today, there are women in this country being prescribed this drug, which is a great drug. It's a very effective anti-epileptic fit drug. It's very good at treating bipolar and also migraines. But we need women to have knowledge. We need to share knowledge with women so they can make decisions over their own bodies and over their own health in pregnancy. So I would like to urge the Minister in his response to, and colleagues have mentioned this already, to respond to the call to publish prescribing data so that we know if certain areas of the country are over-prescribing this drug to women of childbearing age. And I would add my voice to the call for a public inquiry into this national scandal, and that we have an adequate compensation package for all those many people and their families who are affected by this national scandal.
Dr. Philippa Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I again would like to pay tribute to the member from North Norfolk for getting this debate and trying to air this issue again. Epilepsy affects 1% of the population, that's 600,000 people. And it is not a trivial condition, it is dangerous. As we heard, 1,200 people a year die of epilepsy, and we mustn't diminish that. At the lowest level, if you have a fit after being well controlled, suddenly you can't drive again. That's quite a big impact on people, and at the other end, death. So we must be really careful that we do not send out a message that anti-epileptics are bad, or even Epilim. It works really well, and it is one of the drugs that is often able to control particularly the most dangerous seizures, the tonic-clonic or grand mal as it used to be called, with one drug. Almost all anti-epileptics carry risk. Now, sodium valproate is the worst by far, but all the ones that you've heard of in the past, phenytoin, phenobarbital, primidone, carbamazepine, they all carry some risk. So I think we have to recognise it's not just like the doctors prescribed the wrong drug. This is really hard to deal with. And what we need is that people have specialist input. And so what we're really asking for is that when girls reach puberty, until they reach either menopause or into their 50s, when there is no risk of them having children, that the decisions are made with them by specialists. Now, we've heard that obviously there was recognition right back in the 70s that there could be congenital abnormalities brought about by sodium valproate. But what appears to have changed is the scale. We see, if you look back, they talk about 2% risk of malformations and some possibility of developmental delay. What we see now is we're talking 10% of children with a birth defect, which might be something like cleft palate. It might be a minor cleft palate that can be dealt with. It could be right through to spina bifida that means that child is facing major physical disability. But on a much worse scale, 40%, almost half of them, facing some form of developmental delay that can mean autistic spectrum, learning difficulty, ADHD. And that is a big change. So what we have is the recognition, as one of the earlier members, and I've forgotten the name of her constituency, talked about the paper in '95 that started to really bring these cases together. What you have before that is predominantly case reports. Somebody going, oh, this is odd, I'll write it up. But you actually require that someone brings that together. And when we hear there's 400 babies a year being born since the recent attempt to deal with this, what you realise is, had the reporting system, the yellow card system, actually been working, where we might have had 5, 6, 7, 800 a year of these cases, that would have been spotted much more quickly. So the system failed utterly in recognising a pattern. And I would say that has to be reformed. I think if a woman gives birth to a child with a birth defect, or in the very early years, recognition of some kind of major developmental delay, and she's on a drug, I don't care what the drug is, I feel that should be reported. Because that GP may never have seen it before, may not recognise that this could be an association. But someone sitting in MHRA who's receiving 400 or 500 of them certainly ought to recognise that. What we obviously have going forward is how you actually tackle this. And I think one of the shocks is that the toolkit, having been put out in February 2016, as over the last years, this huge scale has been recognised. And that's the change, recognising the scale. To hear that over 2/3 of women have not received any part of it is incredibly disappointing. And I would have to say it's great that there's some marking on the packaging, but maybe actually more of that needs to be combined, because you're not then depending on someone remembering to hand something out or to pick something up. You're actually empowering that woman to say, oh, what's that? You've never talked to me about that. You're starting to have both sides of the equation have the chance to remember and discuss it. We've predominantly focused on the use of sodium valproate in pregnancy and the results of that. But by the time a woman is pregnant, as the Honourable Member for... Strangford... I'm not doing very well today. 650 names is hard enough. Adding another 650 just does my head in. Anyway, mentioned that by the time the woman is pregnant, and knows she is pregnant, crucially, it is too late. Because these abnormalities happen in the first trimester, the first 3 months, when the brain and spinal cord is forming, when the arches of the face are combining. And that's why it's particularly neural tube defects, brain function abnormalities, and cleft palate. And so many women leading hectic lives may already be 2 months pregnant by the time they finally know. And that means it's too late. So that's why the annual review is important. And if there are children on Epilim, and Epilim is perfectly fine to use in a girl if that gives good control for grand mal seizures. But it needs to be flagged up that when it is expected she's approaching puberty, these discussions need to start with her and her family. Family planning is important for all women. But for women on these kind of drugs that must be stopped in pregnancy, it's absolutely crucial. And so what we need is to have that discussion, to look at the alternatives. I would echo the comment about if a woman is pregnant and did not plan, not to just stop the drug on her own, she should have emergency access to a specialist who is able to look at her type of epilepsy and discuss with her, would it be safe to just take nothing? Is it better to change to something else? But to recognise that to actually face uncontrolled seizures in pregnancy can cause you to lose the mother and the baby. And we mustn't have any kind of irresponsibility around not flagging that up. We had a debate in this chamber last week on baby loss. Again, a very powerful cross-party debate on the anguish that people face, whether it's early miscarriage, stillbirth, or neonatal loss. And we talked about that loss and bereavement. But any of us, whether male or female, who have had children, know the expectation and joy of waiting for a child. And therefore there is still exactly that bereavement when we know that our child is going to face a life of difficulty, of physical and mental difficulties, of learning disability. We know that a child with marked learning disability has only a 7% chance of working. So for the parents, the stress of knowing that there will come a point when they're not there, and how will their child, maybe now a young adult, actually survive facing a harsh world. So I think having financial support is absolutely crucial to give families peace of mind. I think we do need an inquiry, but I think rather than multiple inquiries, I think actually bringing some of these common themes together into one would be much more powerful to get people to recognise we are talking relentlessly repeating patterns. So let's try and reform the things that allowed this to happen, and let's make sure we support the families and the children to whom sadly it has happened.
Shadow Minister Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It really is an honour to be responding for the second time today in this chamber on behalf of the opposition. Firstly, I want to start by thanking the Honourable Member for North Norfolk for securing this very important debate today. It really is a much needed one to finally discuss in detail and in Parliament, in the main chamber, the issues around Valparaiso and what the government must be doing to address this injustice. He spoke with such passion and obvious outrage on behalf of the thousands of women and children affected by this disgraceful scandal. I too want to thank the other honourable members who've taken part in this debate today, the Honourable Member for Congleton, Newport West, Eastleigh, Hayward and Middleton, Bury North, who gave an extremely moving account of how this drug helped him as a young boy, making the point that when used correctly, as we've heard, this can be a very good drug. There was also the Honourable Member for Strangford, Lancaster and Fleetwood, and the Honourable Lady who speaks for the SNP from Central Ayrshire. It's been a very good debate. As we've heard, the issues of valproate and the effects it has on fetuses are not new. In fact, they span a significant number of years, going back as far as the 1970s and 80s, when the first cases of the effect of valproate were documented. Even recent scientific research has shown that valproate can have an impact on a child's life, including a study finding that 10% of children exposed to valproate will be born with a major congenital malformation, 29% requiring additional educational support, and 6% being diagnosed with significant social communication difficulties such as autism. Whilst there have been some movement on making women aware of the risks of valproate during pregnancy through the valproate toolkit, as we've heard, there is still far more that should and must be done to support these women and their children affected so seriously by this injustice. The scope of this issue is serious. Data from 2010 shows that over 21,500 women were prescribed valproate. Whilst not all of these women will have since been or plan to be pregnant, it is worrying that following the toolkit's publication, there is still not enough awareness of the risks, with 85% of patients not receiving the booklet and 90% not receiving the pharmacist's card. It's important that the Minister looks into this matter as a matter of urgency and ensures that more awareness is created to help address this lack of knowledge that could save so many innocent lives from being irreparably, damaged. I knew I couldn't say it and I still put it in the speech. As part of this, would the Minister be minded to agree that the NHS should make it mandatory for every clinician prescribing sodium valproate to a woman or a girl of childbearing age to have a conversation with her about the risks during pregnancy upon first prescribing the drug, and then at least yearly before her prescription is renewed? Over the decades, there have been countless opportunities for this drug to be investigated, especially when evidence from the 1980s grew. Yet the various regulatory bodies for medicines have failed to even set eyes on this as an issue worthy of investigation, with only fleeting references in position papers and reports, nothing substantial. This is why it is welcome that the European Medicines Agency, in one of its first public inquiries on the 26th of September this year, called together patients, carers, doctors, pharmacists and academics to look into this matter further. And it will be interesting to see what outcomes come from this investigation upon its conclusion. I also think that we have a duty to set the mistakes or oversights of previous governments right, which is why we are here today to seek justice for the victims of sodium valproate in pregnancy and their families. This is why we on this side of the House welcome the calls for the government to look into how they can help compensate these families who have been so significantly affected. Before I continue, it must be noted that this drug, as others have already said, is an effective treatment, and for many it may be the only drug that works for them. Nevertheless, there is a systematic failure to inform women of the dangers of taking valproate. If expectant mothers had had the risks laid out clearly for them, then many children would not have been harmed, and I hazard a guess that we would not be debating this issue today.